Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Happy Flag Day! Yay! Flag Day! Flag Day! Woohoo! By the way, if any of you out there are not familiar with it, we are actually celebrating today as a country, June 14th, Flag Day. So we're going to talk about the flag. We're going to talk about celebrating symbols and things along those lines. I'm really actually quite excited about today's show. First of all, today's episode is titled Happy Flag Day, Abraham Lincoln, Patriot or Tyrant. This is episode 75 of our program, On the Move Show. For those of you who are new to the program, my name is Mac Worley III, and this is On the Move. This is the show that inspires you, or at least attempts to try to inspire you, to stand up for your rights. At 5:15 p.m. today, we're going to be joined by a special guest, Rob Stratton. Mr. Stratton is a member of the Libertarian Party of Washington State and Whatcom County Open Carry. I believe I said Whatcom correct. I'm pretty sure that's how you pronounce it. Maybe I'm wrong. Things in Washington are difficult to pronounce. I've noticed there's a few names out there. A lot of them, Native American heritage kind of things that I have difficulty with. That's because I was a newcomer to the area, and obviously many of you know now I no longer live in the Pacific Northwest at all. So I was there for about 2 years. So I had some time to realize some of the things that I was pronouncing incorrectly, like Willamette, things along those lines. So there's a few other names that many of you are probably very familiar with that are mispronounced frequently out there. So anyway, first things first, I would love to ask you guys to do me a solid, a big favor. If you could follow us on Spreaker, that is Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. That is SPREAKER. Go to the website, Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Click the follow button. You will be doing so much to help us out. It does help as far as ranking us in the searches on Spreaker and everything. And basically, for every follower that we get, it's a possibility that one more person out there will see us in a search, will come up a little bit further than somebody else that may have a little less followers than us. So at least that's the plan, that's the goal. And if you're just joining us, if for some reason this is your first time experiencing this podcast, first I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate you guys giving us an opportunity to talk to you about all things liberty. Here at On the Move, we talk about all things liberty, guns, government, things along those lines. I'm very opinionated, and the best part about this show, for me anyway, is hearing your thoughts, having a conversation and a dialogue with you guys. That is why I do this program. I don't want to sit here and monologue. Sometimes I do, and if nobody's talking, I will. But I'd much rather dive in on issues with you guys together, and especially if we disagree. I think that is the heart of the show, is talking about issues that we don't see eye to eye on. I want to find out why you believe what you believe, and kind of verify if I think you're right. If you meet the reasonable test. As far as I'm concerned, and I'll tell you where I stand, and maybe we'll meet somewhere in the middle, or maybe we'll just agree to disagree, and that's the beauty of it. We can have debates, we can have talks, we can have the academic form of an argument, but we don't have to actually argue. We don't have to yell. We don't have to get fired up about things. We can just talk. And that's what this is about. So anyway, we're going to be joined today, like I was saying, by special guest Rob Stratton. Now, for those of you who don't know who Rob is, he is one hell of a guy. I just have to say first and foremost, he's a great guy. I've had the opportunity to listen to him speak at last year's Libertarian Party convention in Washington State. He gave a good speech, and that was actually what caught my attention. I knew who he was, but I listened to his speech, and I really liked what he had to say. So in my opinion, he's one of the deepest thinkers within the Libertarian Party. He's got his philosophy worked out, and many of you know that's what I strive to do myself, is to try to really figure out where I stand. I broaden to every issue that I possibly can and figure out how I can relate libertarian philosophy, individual freedom, to every situation. So I'm really excited to pick his brain because, I think he's got a real good handle on his personal philosophy. And, I'd like to see, where we stand together here, see if we agree, if we disagree, where the differences are, and figure it out. We're going to be having several different topics that we're going to be talking about. First and foremost, since today is Flag Day, June 14th, we're going to be talking about Flag Day and some of the history behind the American flag. In addition, I want to move to a topic that we've touched before recently, but I would like to get your guys' take on it, and I think it needs to be discussed more, being that it is Flag Day. Flag burning, stomping on the flag, desecrating the flag in some way. We're going to talk about it, my thoughts on it, and, basically we'll open up the floor here. If you guys would like to join in on the conversation, you can do that. The number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. In addition to that, one of the main topics of this show that I really want to focus on today is Abraham Lincoln. Was he a patriot? Was he a tyrant? I'd like to hear Rob's thoughts on this, and then I'll give you guys my take. We'll have a conversation about it and everything. And also, I'd like to, if we have time, I'd like to go to property rights, talk about why they're important, why they are essential in a individual freedom society, in a society that respects the individual. Why are property rights so essential? And lastly, I also want to get to positive and negative rights. What in the heck are these things, right? So we're going to talk about all these things. We got a lot of other topics. I got some news stories I want to get to here. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to all this, but I'm going to give it the old college try. And again, as usual, if you guys want to join the conversation, the MacPack phone lines are open, so light them up, guys. The number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, 360-450-5625. Or you can email the show at talk@onthemoveshow.com. You can message us on facebook.com/onthemoveshow. Tweet us at onthemoveshow. All those ways you can get in contact with the show live on the air. And even if we go off the air or whatever, feel free to comment anything that you have on your mind about the show. We'll read your comment on the air on the next show. And, if we have a good opportunity to discuss some things, it'd be great. I love those kind of things. That's what I live for. So anyway, let's go ahead and just get this stuff out of the way first. If you don't know already, please check us out at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. We broadcast live every Sunday from our website. That's the hub. So feel free to check us out on TheMoveShow.com. You can follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And follow us at Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. So I want to talk about some of the things before we get into Flag Day. I want to talk about some of the things that we got going on here. Many of you may know we simulcast every show that we do. We simulcast on HaywireGulch.com. So first and foremost, go check those guys out. Support that community of patriots. Bunch of great people over there. HaywireGulch.com. In addition to that, now we have been picked up by the 405media.com, and we're going to be broadcasting our first hour over there as well. So I'm looking forward to getting to know those guys. I think from what I've seen about them, they seem like a really awesome group of people, and I wanted to be a part of it. So I got a hold of them and asked them if they'd be interested, and they seem to be interested. So we're going to see how this plays out. I'm really, really excited about this, though. This is a big deal to me. And I'm hoping that I fit in real well over there. I think I will, and I think that everything's gonna be all hunky dory. So, anywho, let's go ahead and move on to the first topic today. I want to give a little bit of history about the flag and actually talk about Flag Day in general. And I got an article here from ibtimes.com. It's Flag Day 2015 USA. 10 facts about the Star Spangled Banner that you might not have known about. So this is an article written by Julia Glum, like I said, on IB Times. And let's see, Sunday is Flag Day. And
replaces the unique
we got a clip playing here. I don't know where that came from. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay, Sunday is Flag Day, an annual observance of the Second Continental Congress official adoption of the Stars and Stripes in 1777. At the time, they resolved that the flag of the 13 United States be represented by 13 alternating red and white stripes, and the Union by 13 white stars in a blue field, representing a new constellation. Now, more than 200 years later, with an updated design, the flag is an American icon. Flag Day, though not a federal holiday, is full of tradition. The holiday was established in 1916 by President Woodrow Wilson, and in 1949, Congress declared June 14th a national holiday. Pennsylvania is the only state that observes Flag Day as a state holiday, according to the History Channel. But others host parades and parties in the flag's honor, just as Wilson intended. Let us, on that day, rededicate ourselves to the nation, he wrote in his proclamation, one and inseparable from each and every thought that is not worthy of our fathers. First, vows and independence, liberty, and right shall be excluded, in which we shall stand with united hearts. For an American which no man can corrupt, no influence draw away from its ideals, no force divide against itself, a nation signally distinguished among all other nations of mankind for its clear individual conception alike of its duties and privileges and its obligations and rights. So I just want to give you guys these 10 facts here that you may not have known. It's about Flag Day. Bernard J. Sigrand, I believe that's how you pronounce it, is considered the father of Flag Day. In 1885, as a young teacher at a high school in Wisconsin, Sigrand put a small flag on his desk and told his students to write an essay about it. He fought for the rest of his life to formally establish the holiday, according to the National Flag Day Foundation. The flag has been changed, this is the second fact, has been changed 27 times. The final star for Hawaii was added in 1960. Third fact, the first time the flag was flown after being adopted was on August 3rd, 1777 in Rome, New York. Fact number 4. The flag's colors have become significant over time. The white is for purity, the red is for valor, and the blue is for justice, according to usflag.org. Fact number 5. President George Washington described the design like this. We take the stars from heaven, the red from our mother country, separating it by white stripes, thus showing that we have separated from her. And all the white stripes shall go down to posterity, representing liberty. Fact number 6. The first flag, was probably created by Francis Hopkinson, who signed the Declaration of Independence. He requested a quarter cask of the public wine as payment for his design. He was rejected. Fact number 7. Betsy Ross sewed the first American flag according to a pattern which was likely Hopkinson's. Legend has it she changed it to the 6-point stars he'd drawn to 5-point ones because they were easier to stitch. Fact number 8. Sea Captain William Driver gave the flag its Old Glory nickname in 1831, according to USACityLink.com. Fact number 9. The current design of the U.S. flag was created by Robert G. Heft, who made the pattern for a high school project. He earned a B- at first, but when the government chose it, his teacher raised the grade to an A. Fact number 10. There are 6 American flags on the moon. 5 are standing, but Neil Armstrong fell over. So, anyway, we're going to get to a lot of different discussion regarding flags and Flag Day and the symbolism behind it, and also, as far as people desecrating them and whatnot. And I'll give you guys my thoughts, and I definitely want to hear Rob Stratton's thoughts on this. He'll be giving us a call here in a couple minutes. And anyway, at this time, we're going to go ahead and cut to a quick commercial break. If Rob has joined us by then we'll go ahead and have him on the show. If not, I'm going to go ahead and enter into the Weekly Defender, which is a segment of the show I haven't done in a while, but it's one of my favorites. It's basically where we talk about armed citizens in the news who've used their firearms to defend themselves or property, something along those lines. Regardless of what happens, you guys don't want to miss what's coming on next. Don't go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore. With the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mac Worley III.
Hello, we're back, everyone. Thanks for sticking with us. All right, at this point, we have our special guest. I believe this is Rob Stratton on the line. Let's go ahead and go for it here. Hey, is this Rob on the line?
This would be Rob. Hey, Mac, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us, first and foremost. Secondly, I just want to get your thoughts here on this whole Flag Day celebration. What do you think in general about celebrating the flag?
That's a complicated one for me. I grew up in a religion where we didn't celebrate the flag or nothing, but we had great respect for it as a symbol of our country, for what it stood for. So we would never desecrate or anything. So I'm kind of torn on it because I don't really have any special connections to a piece of cloth other than I respect it as a symbol of our country.
Yes, sir. And you know, I feel very passionate regarding the flag. Like, I would never desecrate it myself, and you know, I don't really support the actions of individuals who do desecrate it. However, I do recognize that they have a right to desecrate the flag, and you know, it's their property as far as I'm concerned. Especially if they bought it, if they didn't just take it from somebody's flagpole and desecrate it. If they bought it, I don't have any issue with them doing that. I think it's offensive, and it's very offensive to a lot of people. Personally, I'm not, really that offended by it, because for me, I look at it as, it's a symbol of freedom, and one of those freedoms is to destroy that very symbol. And if we take those symbols, add more value than the freedoms that they're supposed to represent, then they really don't mean anything. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of it. Like, I wouldn't desecrate it either. I wouldn't even use the term desecrate personally, because that kind of has a connotation of a religious, reverence to it.
Yeah.
To me, it is an important signal. It's like any mascot, right? There's a big fight in the Libertarian Party now. What should we use as our mascot? The lion, Lady Liberty, the porcupine? It's important to people because they want to have a symbol of what represents themselves. And I see that this flag does represent, or what it was supposed to represent, was a union of 50 sovereign countries that have come together for a common goal of liberty.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I love how you use that, as far as 50 sovereign countries. And that's, I feel like I've been beating this drum since we started this podcast. One of the very first shows I was doing was talking about the Civil War and some of the issues behind it. We're going to get to those later as far as Abraham Lincoln and whatnot. But, it's absolutely true that symbols are important. And they're important, and I think there's nothing wrong with patriotism. Patriotism is good. That's a good thing to be, loyal to your country. However, it's not. I don't think it's a good idea to be more faithful to the symbols that these things that are supposed to symbolize freedom. I don't think it's good to be more loyal to those actual symbols than the freedoms themselves. So when people were saying, we have to make it illegal to burn a flag or to stomp on a flag, or when people, there's been several cases, and we talked about some of them recently on the show not too long ago, where individuals were stomping on flags and somebody came up and took the flag from them. I disagree with that, because first of all, you just violated that person's property rights.
Right.
And I think property is one of the most important concepts when you're talking about liberty, individual liberty. And to violate that right, it absolutely, stands in stark contrast of what that symbol is supposed to represent. Would you agree with that?
Oh, exactly. All rights come from property rights, and we have to hold that in the highest esteem. The flag is an important symbol to very many people, and it isn't to some other people. So we have to have a respect of a two-way street. Yeah. Is it offensive to many? Exactly. Should people kind of take that into concern? Yes, they should. It's the same way as if maybe racist language is offensive to some people and not to others. Mm-hmm. When you're in certain groups of people, you kind of watch what you do, because we don't want to purposely offend other people. It kind of thwarts what our message should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it doesn't accomplish. I mean, unless your task is to be divisive and to create drama between different groups, it doesn't really accomplish anything positive to burn a flag, other than, I guess, the assertion of the right to do it. If you want to just say, hey, I have the right to do it, that's all fine and good. But to actually burn the flag, I think it does. It creates controversy, and it can create enemies, and that's an issue, because for me, I don't want to divide ourselves in our liberty communities. I want to try to build as many bridges as possible and try to find common ground. But I also don't believe in compromising my principles either. So if you and I, we have differences of opinion, but we're both, even if we, agree to disagree, that doesn't do anything to compromise my principles. I'm not going to say that, I agree that, something that I don't agree with, just to make a friend with somebody. We can come together on the issues we agree with, and we can not on the issues that we have disagreements on. And
that's the great thing about humans. We can absolutely get along with each other, even if we don't agree on things. I mean, I have friends that are outright socialists, and then we'll have knockdown arguments about how wrong and stupid that is, but we're still having a beer together and having fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that to me is what I like. And I don't know if you're like this, but for me, I was mentioning earlier in the show, for me, I love the conversations. I love the debates. And for me, it's not about winning or losing. I'm merely just trying to present my side of the argument, and I want to hear the opposing side. I love it when I talk to somebody who disagrees with me, because I want to understand, well, maybe they are right. So let me hear them out. Let me put it through the smell test. All right, okay. No, it's not right, or yes, it is. And that's how, I've come along in my progression as far as a libertarian or a liberty-minded person. I started at one end of the spectrum, and I'm still not perfect. I still don't understand everything, but I've come a long way. And I've done that by hearing people out.
Yeah, and that's where some people say, "Oh, we should never argue. We need to." I call baloney on that. Arguing is how we expand ourselves. If we cannot see our point through to the end, a logical end, without being fallacious, then we need to rethink our point. And I've had many of my viewpoints changed by arguing with people. People have told me, no, you're wrong. And they've explained their viewpoint, and I've had to think about it and dwell on it and went, you know what? They were right. I was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, not to put you on the spot or anything, but what subject in particular has that happened to you for that you can remember?
Oh, there's been several. One is maybe military intervention. When I was younger, I fell for the lies that we had to be out there, we had to do this, we had to be doing. And as I got older and people explained things to me, I realized really every time that the U.S. is involved somewhere else, we've made it worse. And we've made it worse for Americans. We've lost freedom for Americans for doing this. And we've, in many instances, destroyed the freedoms of people in the other lands, who maybe would have been more free if they would have just been left alone to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when it comes to military intervention, for me, and I'd love to hear where you stand on this as far as, getting involved in foreign wars. For me, I just think that if there's no real and actual threat to the homeland, if we're talking about a potential threat of something that may potentially one day cause harm to us, I just don't think that we should get involved unless there's an actual threat to us. And I really have a hard time buying into this whole national security conversation, because it's always something. There's always going to be some threat out there on the horizon that the government wants us to be afraid of, and that way we give them more power and they ratchet up the controls of government. And after that threat's over, those controls don't get ratcheted down. They stay that way until the next enemy, and then they ratchet it up even further.
Yeah, they never have. I mean, especially since World War I, that was part of the rationalization of the socialists and the progressives who were taking over the government was, hey, if we can get into war, we can push these initiatives forward. And they have. They really have been doing that since 17 got in the war. That they've never let go of those initiatives that they push and those controls they put over American people.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and you know, we see that with the Patriot Act, the NDAA. None of these things are going away. It's just this is just a part of life now. And even when we're talking about the Patriot Act reforms, what Rand Paul has been discussing about with Mitch McConnell and everything, it's really not going away. And in a lot of ways, people have been saying that these new changes to the Patriot Act may even be worse. Yeah,
I haven't got too much into it, but from what I read about it, I think Judge Napolitano had some pretty interesting takes on it, how really it was worse. We shouldn't be celebrating another misnamed acronym, the Freedom Act, which really has nothing to do with our freedom.
Yes, sir. Well, it has everything to do with our freedom. It's just that we're not going to see any of it.
Yeah, exactly. It has everything to do with taking our freedom away.
Yeah, it's like the shell game where they're hiding the freedom under the cup. You never know which one it's going to be. They keep moving it around. So, as far as the Civil War, this is a big topic, and it's rather lengthy, and I'm happy to have it with you. So I'm curious, what is your thoughts on the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln in general, and his assertion that it's more important to protect the Union itself than the sovereignty of these other nations, which is essentially what the South and the states are nations coming together. It's more important to keep the Union together than to uphold and abide by the Constitution.
Well, it's kind of a oxymoron, that statement itself, because you can't protect a union by forcibly making people be part of it. Otherwise, it's no longer a union. If you have members of a church or members of a PTA, and some of the members want to leave and start their own church or PTA, and you point a gun at them and say, no, you're not going to leave and start your own church, are you really a voluntary union at that point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're not. That's absolutely true. And it's important to note for everyone out there, this country was founded upon a voluntary government. People coming together, these state representatives coming together to say, yes, we'll be a part of this. We'll all be sovereign states underneath one flag, and we'll be friends and work together and things like that. But they wanted to keep the federal, the central government small and not to really have a big impact on it. So in terms of...
Well, the other thing you look at is Lincoln, as a senator, talked about the right of succession and how that was a fundamental American right. And he was right at that point. These same colonies had succeeded from what was their country at the time, Britain. They were all British citizens. But later when he was president, he did a total, like many of these presidents we see, Barack Obama, all these other presidents, did a total flip-flop on the issue.
Well, they say power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, that's really no surprise. For me, one of those, the issues, the biggest issue I think about it is because obviously we signed the Constitution, and it's a contract. I mean, that's the way I look at it. Would you agree that it's essentially just a contract between different parties?
Yeah, it's kind of a contract between sovereign states. I know some people like to try to call it a social contract. It's not. It's a contract between sovereign states, between the governments of the states. If the people of that state choose, and it's a voluntary contract. It's a two-way street. They can leave. Another interesting thought I had was, if you read the Constitution, it appears that the U.S., that union, could actually also kick a state out. There's a special clause that kind of points to that, where the United States is a guarantee that the state would have a Republican form of government, Well, if the state didn't have a Republican form of government, but the state was sovereign, the only way that they could guarantee it is by not allowing them to be part of the union anymore.
And for the benefit of the listeners, can you explain what the concept of state sovereignty is?
State sovereignty itself would be well, right now it's kind of what people think of the United States. They think of the United States as a sovereign nation, but at that time, state sovereignty would be the same thing as Spain, England, or France. The people in those countries had a sovereign government that made their own decisions and weren't subjective to any other government.
And in that term too, you're talking about actually the federal government as well. So that each state was basically a nation unto itself, and
right.
The federal
the only
government,
powers that the federal government had were the enumerated powers that the states had voluntarily surrendered.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those powers were granted to the government. The government didn't have them. They were given to the federal government from the states because the states are the ones who signed the contract to begin with. So,
yeah, and if you look at the ratification documents of Virginia, New York, Rhode Island, matter of fact, they specifically said they had the right of succession to leave if they didn't like what the federal government was doing.
Mm-hmm.
But there was also that if they decided that the federal government was abusing the powers given them, the states could take those powers back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that makes sense. If you're in a situation where you're voluntarily joining an organization, just like for example, let's say if the Libertarian Party, because I know you're a member of the Libertarian Party, so you voluntarily join the Libertarian Party, and you can leave at any time that you want. There's no restrictions. You can't say I want to leave and then them say no, you're not going to leave. In fact, we're going to double your dues. You owe us more money because you want to leave now. And then if you tried to leave anyway, they wouldn't be allowed to just come into your house with, and kick in your door and say we're taking over. You no longer have the right to choose what organizations you're going to belong to. That's not the way it works. We're talking about a voluntary society, and to use force in the situation that Lincoln did, because states wanted to leave the Union, and they were joining that Union voluntarily to begin with, so they have every right to leave if they disagree with whatever's going on, and especially if there is some kind of violation of the contract, which is the Constitution. Can you talk about how the federal government actually violated the Constitution in the Civil War?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't call it a civil war. That's one thing that's hard. It's popular vernacular now. And that was one of the things I was corrected on. Because what is a civil war? A civil war is people fighting for control of the existing government. Well, the South left. They didn't want control of the existing government. They were forming their own. So that was one violation, was that the federal government was forcing their top-down structure upon them, and it was supposed to be a bottom-up structure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was one of the main ones. One of the other ones, too, was that Lincoln's party was the I know this might touch base with a lot of people, but the Republican Party was founded on high tariffs, government subsidies to corporations, and the South had big problems with that. That was not any part of the purview of what the federal government was supposed to be doing. There was no constitutional grants to grant subsidies to railroads or businesses.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's nowhere in the Constitution that permits them to do that. And one thing that I find interesting when we're talking about the Constitution, when people say this is unconstitutional, that's unconstitutional, is when we're talking about enumerated powers. The federal government has the power to do only what they have been enumerated in the Constitution. Those are the only powers they have. They can't grant themselves more powers unless it's via a constitutional amendment. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's what the specific enumeration of the powers is supposed to be. If the federal government ever tried to use the General Welfare Clause or the Commerce Clause like Hamilton, and now every politician nowadays uses it, the southern states never would have joined the Union. They only joined the Union, well, actually, most states wouldn't join the Union, including New England and the Middle states. They only joined the Union under the understanding that the government was one of limited powers.
Absolutely. And that, I think, is the main premise here of why the South seceded. People say that it's about slavery. And yes and no, it is and it isn't. Because when you enter into a contract with somebody, and that's what the Constitution was, a contract, the South went in with the understanding that there would be no ability for the federal government to limit or regulate slavery. They weren't to touch it. So they signed the Constitution, and slavery is actually constitutionally protected up to a certain year in the Constitution. And then they go ahead, the federal government decides, oh, you know what, we're just going to pass the Emancipation Proclamation. And the states, are seceding because of it, because the federal government side of the contract violated the contract. I mean, that's basically it's a contract violation.
The Emancipation Proclamation wasn't declared until 2 years into the war, and Lincoln himself admitted that was nothing but a military maneuver.
Yeah. Well,
now the thing is slavery wasn't an issue for the North.
Mm-hmm.
They did not care about black people. They didn't care that there was slavery. Matter of fact, Lincoln supported the Corwin Amendment. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm not.
There might even be hints that he helped write it. Okay, there was a Senator, Corwin, who wrote an amendment that would have made, the original 13th Amendment would have made slavery a permanent institution of the United States. Lincoln supported it because he wanted to preserve the Union.
So, from my understanding of why the war essentially kicked off, because obviously the North declared war on the South because of them seceding, and they were seceding because of Lincoln getting the presidency, and there was the threat that he would do something regarding slavery. And so they already started to secede even before he passed the Emancipation Proclamation.
That is one theory on it. Now, Lincoln had made so many promises and concessions that he wouldn't do anything about slavery.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, this is some Southern politicians who were making that a claim and that an issue. We see the same things going on today, with abortion or marijuana and all these things. And really, that's not the core issue. In Lincoln's inaugural address on his first presidency, he doesn't mention slavery at all. But he does mention that he was willing to go to war over tariffs. And when South Carolina nullified the tariff, he did. He went to war over it.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty crazy. I know there's a quote. I'm probably going to mess this quote up from Lincoln. I'm basically paraphrasing from memory here. He was basically talking about how, as long as there is two different races of people, whites and African Americans, or I'm sure what he said was, blacks or something like that. As long as there's two different races, there's going to be an inferior and a superior. And if it was up to him, he would always prefer that the white race is the superior race. And this is a quote from him. And all right, actually, I found it right here. He says, while they do not remain together, there must be a position of superior and inferior. And as much as any other man, I am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. So that's Abraham Lincoln, the supposed, savior of the slaves. He was actually racist himself, and he's not the kind of symbol that we're being told that he is. He has been iconicized essentially as a symbol of freedom when he really wasn't. Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think because after the end of the war, which was an immoral war, they invaded a people who decided to leave. Now, for devil's advocate, I don't believe the war was about slavery, although it was an issue for both the North and the South. Because once the war started, the abolitionists jumped on that war as a means to end slavery. And I don't blame them. I think I would have done the same thing. Here's a chance to end this horrible institution. But the North, who writes the history books, had to make a moral case for what they did. And so to make it about slavery and really not about all these other issues, when the North, in many respects, were more racist than the South, Lincoln, as a senator of his own state, helped pass a law banning blacks from emigrating to his state.
Wow. Yeah. See, it's very crazy to me because I know the history of the North, especially their opposition towards slavery, it really started to affect them when they were banned at some point from importing new slaves. There's a I can't remember what it was now. It's something in the Constitution, I think it was, that after a certain year, we could no longer bring new slaves in, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, and if you read the Southern Confederate Constitution, it mentions the same thing. They banned the import of slaves. They weren't allowed to bring in more slaves.
Yeah, and that is a big deal, because that actually had a lot to do with them stopping their basically ignoring the act of slavery, the institution of slavery, because they weren't profiting off of it anymore. Since you're not shipping new slaves in, and that's where the majority of the slaves were coming in from, is the North. They're being shipped to the North and then shipped to the South from the North. There's no profit in it, and now suddenly they're all high and mighty, that they suddenly now have a problem with it when there's not a buck to be made.
Well, the slavery got instituted. It was funny, at the time of the signing of the Constitution, only 2 states were the holdouts against slavery for the South. Mm-hmm. I think it was South Carolina and Georgia. I think it was 4 New England states were the ones that were like, no, we got to keep that institution alive, because they were making a killing off importing people and selling people.
Yep.
And I think it was the same thing at the time. And there's a book called Border Wars. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who wrote it, but he points out, and even in Rothbard's Conceived in Liberty, he points out that the North didn't get rid of slavery for altruistic reasons. The reasons why the slavery started getting banned in the North was because slaves, both black and Irish, started killing their masters. And they were like, it's like, how do we stop them from killing masters? Okay, well, let's get rid of slavery.
It's never for the reasons like the humanitarian reasons that we're told. We're told that basically the North were the good guys, the South were the bad guys, and the North just wanted to end slavery. And I think for me the reason why we're taught that is obviously the North won, and as it's
so isn't it funny, throughout all of history, the written word that we have in history, good guys always won?
Yeah, absolutely. Winston Churchill once said, "History is written by the victors," and he also went on to say, here's a quote. He was once asked how history will look at him, and he said, "Quite well, since I plan to write most of it myself." So, that's kind of the whole mentality is, and I hope the listeners out there really understand this concept, is that, the history may not always be what you think it is. You may have to unlearn some of the indoctrination you've learned from your school, because it may not be actual correct, especially if they start laying it out as good guys versus bad guys. In many situations, you may have bad guys or badder guys, or just everybody's bad, or there's just shades of gray sometimes.
Like this case, pretty much. I mean, the South was horrible. I'm not trying to be an apologist for the South at all. The Confederate and the Southern government were horrible, right? They had slavery. They weren't altruistic, good people either. But for Lincoln then to be the tyrant, to force everybody under, as Lysander Spooner, who was an avid abolitionist, said, that Lincoln greatly increased the number of slaves by forcing people to be under a government they do not consent to.
Yeah, exactly. And I absolutely think that the institution of slavery is abhorrent. I think the South, that is going to be a stain forever on the South. And it's always going to be there, and it's absolutely terrible. And I think it should be there because...
it is. But what they don't tell you is that northern states still had slavery, like New Jersey, still had slavery.
Yeah, and it's a stain, not just even on the South, it's a stain on America. And that's our bed. Yeah. We should have to sleep in it. But let's not confuse the facts. Let's not pretend that the North was completely, innocent of the institution of slavery. They helped do it themselves, and suddenly when there wasn't a buck to be made, then they had a problem, and then they violated the Constitution to preserve the Union. But they did that through force, and the entire idea...
they didn't really preserve the Union because it was a forced enslavement.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're not really holding true to the principles that our symbols represent. If you put the actual Union itself above the principles that the Union represents, and the document that was used to found it. I mean, it's astounding to me. So let me ask you, in your personal opinion, do you think that Lincoln was a patriot, or was he a tyrant?
Oh, he was a tyrant, and he was a socialist, too. I mean, he had bad things to say about capitalism. He put labor above it. There's a list. Maybe I can try to quickly read it. Kind of long, but 18 questions. I can't remember who originally said it, but Tom Woods reprinted it. And you can ask questions about Lincoln and then judge for yourself whether he was a tyrant or not. It said, what president raised a huge army at his own will without the approval of Congress? What president started a war of choice in violation of every principle of Christian just war teaching? I mean, he threw out the rules of military engagement right out the window. What president said he had to violate the Constitution in order to save it? What president neglected the elected legislature of 13 states to be combinations of criminals that he had to suppress? What president said he was indifferent to slavery but would use any force necessary to collect taxes? What president sent combat troops from the battlefield to bombard and occupy New York City, which was a city of the North? Mm-hmm. What president sent the army to arrest in the middle of the night thousands of private citizens for expressing their opinions and held them incommunicado in military prisons with total denial of due process of law, and had his soldiers destroy newspaper plants? Now, these are things he did in the North. What president was the first ruler in the civilized world to make medicine a contraband of war? What president signed for his cronies special license to purchase valuable cotton from the enemy country, even though he had forbidden such trade for everybody else? What president refused medical care and food for his own soldiers held by the enemy? What president presided over the bombardment and house-by-house destruction of cities and towns that were undefended and not military targets? He deliberately targeted women, children, destroying their housing, food supply, and private belongings. What president's occupying forces engaged in imprisonment, torture, and execution of civilians, seizing them as hostages? Under what president did the Army have the largest number of criminal, mercenary, and foreigners? Who was the first American president to plot the assassination of a head of state? Who had the least affiliation with Christianity of any president and blamed God for starting the war over which he presided? What president voted for and praised a law which forbade black people from settling in his state? What president said that all black people should be expelled from the United States because they never could be full-fledged citizens? What president was the first to force citizens to accept as legal money pieces of paper unbacked by gold or silver? Who was the first president to institute an income tax? Who was the first president to pile up a national debt too vast to be paid off in a generation? Who is considered almost universally as the greatest American president, indeed as the greatest American of all times, and as a world hero of democracy? What predecessor is President Obama most often compared to?
Abraham Lincoln. That is astounding. I mean, the fact is that this stuff is not taught in schools. It's completely glossed over, and I think this is important history that we all should know about. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one reason why I'm so mad and ardent about President Lincoln, because what we were taught. You know, I was taught he's the greatest. He freed slaves. What a cool person, right? He freed all these people. They were slaves just because of the color of the skin, and you find out, no, he didn't. And you find out that things like the Emancipation Proclamation didn't free one slave. Not one single slave. And if you read the document, it actually allowed border states to keep their slaves. He ardently had his administration return slaves to their owners that escaped. You know, if the war was about slavery, wouldn't you be like, hey, come over here. We're free. We're going to free you. He didn't.
It's a complete and total misrepresentation of an important figure. And, you know, history is not always pretty, and we don't always like our forefathers have done. We don't always like what is fact. But, you know, that's the thing about facts, is that they're facts. I mean, you can't change the truth, and to do that is a lie. And I always like the quote by John Adams. He said, "Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they can't alter the state of the facts and evidence." So I mean, you have to just know the situation. You know, it's not. I don't think it's helpful to have this whole idea that, you know, we're Americans, we're perfect, we don't, you know, we've never done anything wrong, and that's just not the case. I mean, there are things that we have done, and I'm not saying that we're bad people, and I'm not saying that we have a bad country. I'm just saying let's acknowledge, some of the errors that our forefathers have made and learn from them and don't repeat them.
Exactly. And how can we not repeat history if we don't know true history? See, if that's that old saying, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're taught fake history. So now we're not going to repeat fake history, and we end up repeating the same history that actually happened, which was horrible and yucky and gross.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that to me is one of my biggest fears, is that our country is going to move to a point where we just no longer even teach history. It's no longer an important subject in our schools, and I think it's got to be the most important subject as a society that you can teach. It may not have a function in your everyday work, things that you do in your job. It may not make you more employable unless you're doing something in an academic or philosophical sense, but it's so important to the heart and character of a country. Would you agree with that?
I mean, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I remember even in history in school, it was boring. It was horrible because all they did was repeat these dates, and the information was just bland. It wasn't lifelong. It was several years ago when I started actually getting into history and reading books by these guys who studied it and would go into the details and bring it to life. Wow, history, it's awesome. And then you do learn from it. You do learn, the colonists made this amendment because this was happening, and these guys did this because this was happening, and it's often not what they're telling you in school happened.
Yeah, for me, my favorite part about history is I look at it as storytelling. It's not even. I don't really care so much about the dates and things like that. I like the stories. I look at them as like fables that are true. Things that actually happen, and you can learn from these things. Learn from people who've come before, and why not learn from that stuff? You can learn from the experience of others, so you aren't repeating the same mistakes over and over again that people have done throughout the millennia. Let's learn from what others have done. But hey, Rob, we got to cut to a quick commercial break. Would you mind sticking with us through the break? Rob, you there? Hello? I think we might have lost Rob. We're going to go ahead and cut to a quick commercial break, and if Rob gives us a call back, I guess we'll continue the conversation.
No, I'm here. For some reason, that phone was acting up.
Oh, okay. All right. So, would you mind sticking with us through the break? And when we come back, we can talk a little bit about property rights. And I'd actually like to get your take on positive and negative rights.
Oh, yeah, it's cool. This is fun.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, we'll be right back after these messages, guys. Like I said, when we come back, we're going to talk about property rights. We're going to talk about positive and negative rights. What the heck are these things? Rob's going to give us an explanation, and, we'll talk about it. So, anyway, if you want to join in on the conversation, feel free to do so. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. We'll be right back.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA whirly@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mac Worley III.
Hey, MacPack, we're back. I just realized again, I keep forgetting to change that intro there. We're no longer on the left coast or the west coast. Right now we're broadcasting from Kentucky, and that's where I live now. So I will change that. I will get around to it. I just want to give you guys a heads up. We're not on the left coast anymore. We're over here in the great state of Kentucky, and everywhere is problematic and has its own issues. We've discussed in the past my issues with Kentucky as far as some of their liberty restricting laws, some of the things that they do, especially in terms of dry counties of alcohol, things along those lines, prohibition of alcohol. But anyway, one of these days I'll be getting around to changing that that intro. Anyway, when we last left, we were joined by special guest Rob Stratton. We were talking about Flag Day and flag burning, stomping, desecration, things like that. And in addition to that, we were talking about Abraham Lincoln. Was he a patriot or a tyrant? I think we both came to the consensus that he's a tyrant. I want to move on here. I want to talk about something different. And Rob, are you on the line now?
Yes, I'm here.
All righty. So, very first thing, let's talk about property rights. Why are these so important? Why does individual property rights matter?
Well, if we understand that property rights all start off with having property within ourselves. A lot of people make the mistake that property rights is just something that you kind of, possess and you keep from others. But it really is the right to use something, to naturally use something. And this is just the nature of man. And to go against property rights is really abhorrent to the nature of man. It's going against the nature of man. It's breaking natural law.
Absolutely. I always, not always, I just recently read Frederick Bastiat's The Law. Have you read that?
Oh, that's an awesome book.
I love that.
That's the one that made me realize that there is no such thing as a lawmaker, at least a human lawmaker. I'm agnostic, but that you cannot make a law. They already exist. Now you can, because it's natural law. So humans can't make laws any more than we can, make gravity.
Well, for me, the concept that I found the most eye-opening is the idea that there's 2 points to this. First, laws and government, things along those lines, all of those things were established after individuals had already owned private property. They had property rights and individual rights and the right of self-defense, and governments were created as a means, at least just governments were created as a means to collectively, as a collective of people, deciding to protect those individual rights, because it's easier for a collective to protect everybody's rights than it is for one person to sit there trying to defend their property from any kind of intruder, and all of their neighbors are enemies at that point. So basically they team up with their neighbors to protect individual rights as a collective. So the whole idea that you can use the collective power to supersede the individual rights goes against the entire concept of why the government was created in the first place. So
yeah, it's a question I ask people. When does that magic? It's wrong for me to steal from you, and it's wrong for me and two of my neighbors to steal from you. When is that magic part that makes it suddenly right for the government to steal from you?
And the big point that I got, and it really just I blew my mind while I was reading this book, was the part that he's talking about people who think that they are superior to men, and they don't trust men, and they don't think that men should be able to make decisions for their own, and they shouldn't have the ability, or they don't even possess the ability to make correct decisions. So following that logic, you got to ask that individual, well, okay, if men aren't capable of living their lives free and making decisions, then what makes you superior to men because you're a man yourself? So where's your title of superiority coming from? And the best that you could argue would be to say, well, I graduated from this prestigious college, and then you ask, well, what authority did those men have to give you a superiority over other men because they themselves are men? So again, you have no superiority over men. Everyone is equal. That's the only logical conclusion that you can come to in this argument.
Yeah, Bastiat had a gift for making axiomatic or self-evident truths easily understood. Mm-hmm. That's an axiomatic, self-evident truth. If you break everything down and follow it logically, exactly what you stated and what Bastiat states is the truth.
Exactly. Yeah, and anybody who's trying to basically use the collective power of the government to restrict individual rights, they're not telling you the truth. They're playing a shell game with our liberty, so to speak. Don't look over here, look over here. This is what you need to be afraid. You need to give us this power. It's all a shell game. That's the way I look at it.
They try to redefine words like society. They try to conflate words like society with government or with the state. Mm-hmm. And really, society is just nothing but a group of individuals working together or living together. Even the worst, most horrible person in our society is part of society. So, you can't separate the individual out of that.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And by the way, I just looked at the clock here. Looks like the first hour of the show is over, so I don't believe that we're on 405media.com, the405media.com anymore. I think they only cover the first hour of the program. If anybody is still tuned in from there, I just want to say I appreciate you guys listening to the program, and if you want, you can check out the second hour of our program at OnTheMoveShow.com. You probably are already there if you're listening to it at this point, but anywho. What exactly, I want to move to positive and negative rights while we still have a little bit of time here. What exactly is the difference between a positive and negative rights? What are these things?
Well, negative rights is basically they like the only, let me see, I had an example in my head earlier and said that I spaced on it. But the only true role of government, I don't know if you've listened to my speech. Oh, you did. Yeah, I gave a version of it at the gun rights rally in Olympia.
Yes, sir.
So the only thing the role the government has is supposed to be negative, to protect negative influence on rights. So, like, your right to life, my only way really to protect that is not to murder you. That's a negative right. Mm-hmm. Not being murdered. You have a right to life. Your right to property is me not stealing it. The only proper role of government would be to protect those rights, to have a negative influence. I don't think positive rights really are rights at all, but they are described as positive rights. So, right now everybody's talking about the right to health care. Mm-hmm. Well, that only comes at the cost of being infringing on a negative right of somebody else, stealing somebody else's property to give you that right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so the way I understand negative and positive rights is a positive right is essentially something that somebody has to do. It's something that they're required to do for you. That if you have a right to health care, they essentially have to provide you with that health care. A negative right, as you were saying, is basically you have a right to defend yourself, and the only thing that people have to do to allow you to use that right is just to not infringe upon it, and that's a negative right.
Exactly.
You are the one doing it. You can assert that right. It doesn't require anybody else to provide anything for you.
And that's why all rights are negative. And so when people start talking about, well, what about people with different versions of rights? Well, if you look at all rights as negative, there's no different versions of rights because I can't infringe upon your right. And they all are fundamental, and they start with natural law. So your right to your property, I can't have my right to food by stealing your food.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the whole Obamacare debate. For me, I have a major problem with Obamacare for many reasons. But number one, it's trying to portray that health care itself is a human right. Like, you have a right, no matter if you can afford it or not, to receive a service, which that's what health care is, a service from somebody else, which means that you have a right to their supplies, their time, their education. They've spent all that money going to school to learn how to be a doctor, and you have a right to the knowledge that they possess now. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that violates the entire concept of property rights. Would you agree with that?
Oh, I do. I agree with that 100%. I gave an example the other day. Is that it's funny because I've actually gone so far into rights that I am now kind of for a stateless society. I know a lot of people are turned off by anarchy because they don't really understand anarchy. They think it means no rules. Mm-hmm. They think it means no governance. I think those things can still exist. Matter of fact, I think those principles are kind of spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. But it's funny is that some people seem to believe in a sliding scale of slavery. Almost everybody we talk to would agree 100% of owning somebody else. It's just outright immoral. But somewhere along that sliding scale, they also believe that 0% is immoral, and that to me is confusing. It's illogical.
Well, I think a lot of this is people don't spend a lot of time actually thinking about it critically, and that's the point of the show here, is to think about these things, try to talk about issues that maybe we don't think about every day. A lot of people are worried about Monday Night Football and keeping up with the Kardashians. Let's put some thought into liberty. I think I was reading a study. It was like the average American watches, I think, is 150 hours of television a month, something along those lines. I mean, if you can put that much time into your entertainment, there's nothing wrong. I have no problem with you watching TV. Go watch TV. If that's your thing, okay, that's great. But if you can put that much time into television, can you give liberty, a couple hours of your time every week? Just try to expand your mind on some of these topics. I know in order for you to have gotten where you are, you've had to have done that, right, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, to me, once I started learning about it, it was just, I'm a voracious reader, always have been since I was a kid. I mean, it was just one book led to another book, led to another book, led to another book. And it is so interesting. And like you're saying, they spend so much time with these other entertainments, which is fine. But if that's what you want to do, please then don't fall for these lies of people who are telling you, well, we need this socialist program, or we need this positive program, or we need this law. Don't vote for it if you haven't done any kind of research at all into it.
And that's a huge problem. People think that just because they've read the title, that they know. Like,
yeah.
For example, universal background check bill. Oh, well, yeah, that makes sense. I don't want criminals getting background checks, and they may have seen an ad by Bloomberg or something saying this law saves the lives of police officers, and there may be no actual evidence to back that up anywhere. But they put it out, and this person thinks because they saw one political ad and they read the title of the bill that they're somehow informed on it. That's just not the case.
Yeah, I think that's the case with most things, like even history, as we were talking about, history, politics. Most people just really are apathetic about it, and they just kind of, I hate to use the term sheep because we're humans, we are no other animal, but they really are led astray on these things without giving it a second thought.
Yeah, I mean, I have a problem with the sheeple term as well. I don't like to refer to people as that because, again, I think that everybody's kind of on an intellectual journey. Some people never really make it out of the gate. Some people are well onto their path, and I don't really think the journey ever ends. I feel like I've changed my position on things that I thought I really clearly knew, but once it's one of those things that once you really get into a subject, you may realize that you never thought of a subject in the way it actually should have been thought of. So if you don't know what you don't know, how do you learn about it until you just stumble across it? That's why I don't fault anybody for not understanding, but I do fault people for not being willing to learn, not even thinking about it. And basically,
I fault them for them pushing forward an agenda that they don't know and understand.
Exactly.
I don't fault them for being ignorant or naive. I was ignorant and naive at one time, but I was always politically apathetic too. I never voted. I didn't care. Mm-hmm. I just wanted to be my own person. I didn't want to enforce anything upon anybody else. But these people are actually voting, and they don't know these concepts. And that part is disturbing.
Very scary stuff when the uninformed voters are out there in force. That we end up with things like President Barack Obama and Obamacare. So it does become an issue. For me, the whole concept of self-defense. I find it astounding that people come together as a collective to pass laws to restrict something that is constitutionally protected and very, very clear in the Constitution itself, is that it shall not be infringed. Why do you think that this keeps getting, we've edged further and further to the abyss, basically, where there will eventually, if it keeps going, not even be a right of self-defense?
Yeah, and the funny thing is that the Second Amendment isn't a right of self-defense, say, against thugs and robbers. That already exists in our common law. Now, all our states, I think, except for Louisiana, has some weird French founding on its legal system, but all our states were based, including our Constitution, was based on common law. And in that common law, Black's commentaries on common law, it talks about our right to be armed against robbers, thugs, murderers, rapists, whatever else. Mm-hmm. So the Second Amendment was a very specific right of defense against tyranny and against oppression. Mm-hmm. And I think that the people in power, all these politicians, even if they never publicly admit that that's the right, they'll concentrate on, you don't need guns for hunting. They really do know that guns keep them in check, that it's an implied threat to them going above and beyond and being tyrannical. And I think that's the reason why they keep pushing for gun control. Yeah,
and I definitely agree. I think that it's obviously, you have a right to defend yourself against, anybody who would commit force onto you. Now, for me, I don't think that is actually, anyone in particular. I don't think that it's not. I understand that the Second Amendment was put there as a hedge against tyranny. I get that, but for what I believe, I think that the right of, and I'm not even talking about the Second Amendment, the right of self-defense is your right to defend yourself, your family, your property, your life, liberty, and property. If those things are in jeopardy, somebody is using force. It doesn't matter if it's a government entity or an individual. You have the right to defend yourself, and no collective could ever take away that right, because, as we said, the entire purpose of that collective being formed in the first place was to protect individual rights, and to do so would go against its original creation in the first place.
Yeah, I think too that the right of self-defense is one right that we share with all creatures on this planet. Now, most creatures don't have rights because they can't conceptualize rights. But this is one every creature on the planet will defend themselves when they're put in harm's way. Even a tiny little spider in your bathroom is going to do something if you go to try to smash it.
Yeah, everybody, it's innate. It's one of those things that you would do without even thinking about it. You don't have to consult natural law books or the Constitution to know that if somebody's attacking you, you have a right to defend yourself. People will do that because it's a natural reaction, and it makes sense that if there are weapons out there and available, and especially when you start giving these weapons to arming our government or any government in general, the people should have access to the same weaponry used, in my opinion, than that everybody has access to. If the government has that, we should have that. And especially for me, I'm not even just talking about any organization in general. Governments in general have killed more people in human history than any other force on Earth, with the exception of disease and natural death. There are so many violent deaths attributed to governments in history that... Well,
the past century, I think government came close. It was 2 world wars and non-stop fighting.
It's astounding. And then if you look at, in China, Mao, the Great Leap Forward, where they killed millions of people, it's astounding that anyone would put that much faith and trust in a government. If anything, governments should be the ones that are disarmed.
Yeah, it really is. That's why a lot of our founding fathers were outright against standing armies. They just, that concept of government agents walking amongst them, making sure that they're behaving the way the government wanted them to, was horrid. And unfortunately, I find that our so-called peacekeepers have kind of changed into that, along with this alphabet of soup of government agents that we have, that, most of them are very unconstitutional to begin with. we really do have something that's even worse than the modern-day redcoats in our society.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a clip out there from I think it's Governor Cuomo. I'm pretty sure that's Governor Cuomo, where he's talking about how you don't need 10 bullets to kill a deer. That is not why we have a right to have firearms. We have a right to have firearms because you have a right to defend yourself. It's never been about just hunting. Yeah, that's a part of it. It's a small part of it. But everyone has the right to defend themselves with the weapons of the time.
Yeah, the Founding Fathers would have banning guns for any kind of hunting or self-defense would have been as important to them as banning forks and spoons as eating utensils. That was just a part of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, people were walking around with guns all the time back then, and nobody thought twice about it. And it's because, and I've talked about this in the past on the show, it's because it's easy to tell the difference between somebody with intent to harm with a gun and somebody who does not have intent to harm. That's one of the easiest things in the world. Everybody can do it. Somebody's pointing a gun at you, okay, yeah, they're trying to hurt me. If they're not doing it, they're smiling, they're talking to you, they're having a normal conversation, they're acting normal. The only thing is that they have a gun. They're probably not a threat. Maybe you'd want to watch them a little closer. That's on you if you want to do that. And it makes sense. I can understand why somebody would want to do that. But, I still don't think that your nervousness or your ability to be offended easily by an inanimate object such as a gun gives you the right to limit somebody's rights.
No, I open carry every day, actually. I mean, everywhere legally allowed, I'm open carrying. Mm-hmm. I've had that counter, and most people, 97% of my encounters are positive. And I live in hippy-dippy, Bellingham up here. People get it. Even the hippies up here, I don't smoke pot. I'm not into drugs at all. But they're like, you don't mind me smoking pot? No, it's your body. Oh, cool. Yeah, you carry a gun, right on. They get it. They get it. They're not afraid. They're not running scared. Mm-hmm. But the few people who push that idea that you are scaring people, which is usually supposed gun people, especially those from the concealed carry industry, and they have, those classes and all that stuff. They want to teach gun rights. They have something to earn off of it. I've told one person who said that, their right to not be scared or not be angry, and you got to hide it. And I'm like, really? So do you apply that equally to somebody who's a different ethnicity? Or what if they don't like tattoos and are afraid of people with tattoos? They never can apply those principles equally to other things.
Exactly. I think that is the entire point of trying to think critically on these issues. Being able to apply them equally across the board. So let's say, if for example, liberals in general typically support gays to be married, and obviously for gays to be able to kiss in public and things like that, they would be against any kind of law like that. So let's take the same standards that they have with guns and open carried guns. If somebody's offended, then it should be able to be locked down. So what if somebody got offended from a homosexual couple kissing in public? Do they think, or something. Yeah, did they think that should be shut down by the force of law? I think that's abhorrent. But let's follow the same logic that they're saying, and if we apply it to everything, things that they care about, then yeah, according to their logic, it should be. But that's clearly wrong.
Yeah, that's really hypocritical thinking on a lot of their parts. Interesting enough, our open carry group up here, this will be their third year in a row, go to the Pride Parade here, and the gay community love us. There is a lot of gay people who are armed. Last year, we actually got kind of bashed on a local write-up, a local blog, very pop. He was the most read reader in Whatcom County or whatever, and he tried to bash us and talk about how us open carry guys are scaring the gay folks, and so he wouldn't let me reply on his thing. So I messaged Samantha, who's a transgender member of the open carry group, and I said, look what this guy's saying. And she just wrote a brilliant retort. I mean, whether you agree with homosexuality or the LGBT crowd, you couldn't disagree with what she said to this guy. And one of her main points was, maybe you're just jealous because our booth is way more popular than your stupid Democrat booth.
There you go. You know, there could be any reason for somebody to be jealous or upset, but none of those things, you know, being upset, offended, jealous, none of these things have any right to supersede an individual right. You know, especially one enumerated in the Constitution. You know, and with such words, it says "shall not be infringed." Shall not be infringed. Yeah. There's really no reason to have an argument or debate over this, but they go and they make it about the militia now. Now it's okay. Well, it says shall not be infringed, but in a militia. And I'm one of those people that believe that comma in the Second Amendment is very important. What about you, Rob?
Well, of course it's very important. But even in the militia, they're missing the whole point. You can look at the Virginia Constitution, which was written before the United States Constitution, yes, because they were sovereign states before the Union. And it defines the militia right in it. Mm-hmm. It's those people who bear arms. It's the people. So even if it is the militia's definition is us, yep, carrying guns. But then the comma is important because in order to have a free state, a well-regulated, which regulated does not mean impose restrictions upon how our politicians use it today. It meant to make regular, like, you know, if your clock was out of time back then, you would regulate your clock. Mm-hmm. You would make it regular. How do you have a well-regulated militia? Comma, you don't infringe upon the rights of people to have arms. That was the best way to ensure you had a well-regulated militia.
Absolutely, and there's no arguing with the logic, especially when you start, you know, talking about the definitions of words and how they've changed. You know, that's one of the big things that the progressives have done is they like to play the word game, and then they change the meaning of words, and then they perpetuate that for a long time, and then eventually they'll come after whatever they were targeting with that and say, well, look, yeah, it doesn't mean that, and now everybody is on this whole bandwagon of believing the new definitions they've created.
And that word game is up. If you substitute anything in there, like if you substituted in the first part of the paragraph about how important education was, you know, and having well-regulated education, and then had a comma, the right for people to possess books should not be infringed, you know exactly that didn't mean the government could regulate book possession.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't apply for anything else as far as liberals or progressives are concerned. Yeah. You know, it only applies because this is, in their mind, a dangerous weapon that should be feared and restricted and limited, and they don't want anyone to have this because they just don't care. I mean, they really don't care about this individual right, and that's fine. If you don't care about your rights, that's fine. I'm not going to force you to care about them, and I don't think anyone should, but I don't think it's right to force others to relinquish theirs simply because of your unnatural fear of an object that is inanimate.
Yeah, and I think the people who are actually pushing the regulations delude even the other people who believe them, but they really do know what that Second Amendment was for, and that's why they're pushing that. Like we talked about earlier, they do know that's the greatest threat to enforcing progressive ideology and programs upon us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree. So this is kind of an interesting thought process because this is something that I've been thinking about over the past few days, and I'm just kind of curious, where do you think the state of our country is going to be in the next, let's say, the next 20 years? What do you think America is going to look like?
We're really at a weird junction. A tipping point. We are either going to start rolling back or we're going to go full on tyranny. I do have hope. You know, and a lot of people were positive about the Bundy Ranch thing, and maybe I have a different look on that. I have hope for that because I've seen Americans flock from all over the states to stop an aggressive, overbearing government, and it worked. I don't care if Bundy was wrong or right. I mean, he could have been totally wrong. But it warmed my heart to see Americans get together like that to fight an overbearing, aggressive government. Because whether Bundy was wrong or right, that's what the federal government was and was doing. Mm-hmm. I wish that Americans would do that a little more, and I think they're starting to, with the militarization of the police, how they treat certain segments of our population, especially urban folks. I think we need to get together a little more and do a little more of that and show our government, look, we're not going to stand up for it. We, as individuals, all love each other and get along. We don't like what you're doing to us.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's a big part of it. I feel like we are at this tipping point, and I'm not sure if we've already passed the point of no return or not. If the federal Leviathan has grown to the point where it's not gonna, there's nothing that we can do at this point. For me, I think the biggest thing that I feel compelled to do is to try to wake people up to the situation, and I even hate saying that word, but try to just basically open people's eyes to what's going on, and really just let them know what's at stake here. Because just like in World War II, people went to bed and they didn't know if their country was going to be around when they woke up. They had this constant fear of, will my country still be here? I have the same kind of concern. I don't know what the United States is going to look like. I don't know if the Constitution will still be here. I don't know if I'll recognize the country in 20 years. And it's really difficult for me to say that because I hardly recognize the country now from 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I mean, it's things have ratcheted up so much that I don't even recognize it anymore.
Oh, it absolutely has, and it's so funny is because how quickly people come adapted to the tyranny. I read a book called "They Thought They Were Free" by I think his last name was Meyer. It was in the early 50s. He couldn't believe that Germany would let this Nazi thing happen, so he went there and just interviewed Germans, and they thought they were free. And it's the same thing happening. You look at that book; it was written in the early 50s, and you can correlate it to exactly what's happening now. People think they're free. And they're just, of course we've got to support this policy because it's for us. The government told us it's for us. Mm-hmm. It told us it's the right thing, and that's all people are doing. And I try to explain to my kids, and they don't get it because they grew up in it. When I was a kid, and I was 6, 7 years old, me and my younger brother would, ride our bikes all over town, go play by the river, or do all these things by ourselves. Nowadays, parents are thrown in jail for that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, really, where is our country heading?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm really concerned, and I'm not a technophobe by any means. I'm not afraid of technology, but what I am concerned about is the monopoly of force that our government has and the monopoly of technology. As far as I understand it, they have about a 50-year edge on the civilian population in technology. So, what we have now, those were toys that they've thrown away. That our most cool advancements that we have in the civilian market are just mere trinkets to the government as far as their technology is concerned. And by the way, I'm looking up this author here. It's Milton Mayer. They Thought They Were Free, the Germans. Yeah. That's the book that you were talking about. You guys can check that out on Amazon. I just searched it. But and
I think some of his other stuff is more leftist liberal. But that book is a good book to read. Sometimes you got to kind of read things from other people to get an insight. Like, wow, I didn't kind of see it from that viewpoint.
Yeah, well, I got the Communist Manifesto sitting on a bookshelf behind me. You got to.
I read that, and I use it against socialists all the time because even Karl Marx said, "You have to seize upon capitalism, what capitalism has built up, for socialism to work." Mm-hmm. And I ask socialists, at what point do you want to thwart and stop the evolution of human society?
Well, like I said, it's the book is sitting right behind me. I've read it several times actually, and I actually think that it's important to know your enemy. You have to know who's coming up with these opposing thoughts, and also understand their background and maybe some of the reasons why they're saying what they're saying. I absolutely believe what you said earlier. Many of these people know that what they're doing is manipulating the truth and bending facts and trying to basically mold humanity into the shape of their own design. But again, if you pair what the left-leaning kind of material propaganda is saying, and you pair it with things like Bastiat's The Law, it shows all of the holes in their argument and explains things in a way that you can simply understand it. And once you understand the depth of the conversation, you see the big picture, and you can clearly see that the socialist, communist, fascist, whatever ist you're talking about is wrong.
Yeah, and the great thing too about, especially like reading like Bastiat, agree with him or not, it will change how you think forever. because that guy just stated things that just were outright wow. I never thought of it like that.
Yep, I feel the same way. The entire idea that governments came after individuals had property and liberty, and those are the reasons why they created the government in the first place. I'm like, oh wow, yeah, that does make total sense. Governments just didn't pop up out of nowhere. They were created in order to protect property, liberty, and people's individual person. So. Yep. How could they ever go against
Jefferson eloquently put it in the Declaration of Independence too. It's just a simple sentence.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There was actually I was reading an article. It was talking about him. Jefferson basically ripped that statement off of somebody else. Now I can't remember who said it, but there was somebody was saying that he basically had plagiarized that sentence. I think it might have even been Bastiat. I think he plagiarized Bastiat.
Well, Bastiat came after Jefferson. It could have been John Locke, whose theories of natural law and rights. It was a very popular book among the colonists.
Yeah. I mean, I know John Locke, Thomas Paine, Bastiat was getting a lot of play over there as well. So, there's a lot of stuff that was being said in regards to natural law at the time, and I think it's amazing to me how this stuff still resonates today. You can apply; these are basic fundamentals of liberty, natural law, and just independent thinking. These kind of concepts, when you relate it to government, it's timeless. It doesn't matter if these were done in the 1700s, 1800s, or yesterday; they still apply.
Yeah, and I think what's great about natural law is it can evolve too. It's basically a study of human nature. And Bastiat was one of the best at studying human nature, and a lot of economists are. Ludwig v. Misch is one of my favorite, Rothbard too. And they show with these simple statements how going against human nature, especially in economics, always does more harm than good.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to go with the flow. It's easier to go with the flow than to fight the current of humanity, So it makes sense. But hey, Rob, we're going to have to take off. We're going to break into another segment here of the show after we come back from a commercial break. But first, I just want to say thanks so much for joining us on the show. I had an awesome time talking with you. Do you have any social media or anything that you want to promote? If you do, feel free.
Well, I got my own Facebook page. Anything I write, I usually put in my notes section. There's not a lot there, but I have one called There Ought to Be a Law, which is probably a good reason. A good little essay. Your readers are probably like that. And then I have my Move On, Draw, Fire speech, which you heard down in Olympia on there.
Yes, sir.
I think people, especially who are looking into liberty, who are military veterans, might appreciate that one. That was kind of written in honor of my cousin, who had PTSD really bad and committed suicide. One reason why I just really became anti-war, too. Other than that, we have our open carry, Whatcom County Open Carry on Facebook, but there's also opencarry.org if you're interested in the open carry. Nationwide, you can go to your states. We started a Whatcom County thread. There's other people's in every state and county that's got threads. Basically discuss our right to bear arms, and it's not always just about open carry. There's a lot of good political discussions on there too.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, and we were actually talking about open carry on the last episode. So and like I said, I said this last show, all roads lead to opencarry.org. It just, and no matter what, you end up at opencarry.org in some way or another if you're in the gun rights movement.
Yeah, and it's funny because you Google almost anything and it's on that page. I mean, there's a lot of smart people on that page. A lot of my views and a lot of things I've learned have become from direct discussions with people on that forum.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Lots of good people, lots of good information. But anyway, Rob, I really appreciate it again. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been my absolute pleasure to have you on the show. And for those of you who want to get a hold of Rob, his Facebook is facebook.com/Rob, ROB.Stratton, STRATTON.771. You got a whole 770 other Rob Strattons out there, apparently, Rob.
Yeah. Well, it was my honor being on your show, Mac. Keep up the fight. You're a good patriot.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. You are too. And anyway, for those of you out there, we're gonna be taking a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about a few other issues here that I had in mind. I got a couple other news stories, but I want to get to the some of my reflection on the conversation that I had with Rob. I want to talk a little bit about flag burning, stomping, desecration, those kind of things. I have a video that I want to play a clip from and let you guys hear, and I'll give you guys my take on it. So anyway, we'll be back after this break. You guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within occupied territory on the far left coast. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III. Stand up, speak out, and get on the move. And now your host, Mac Worley III.
And we're back. All right, so we talked about a lot of different stuff today. These are the kind of days that I really like. Days when I can sit here and just chew the fat with somebody. You know, we're sitting here having a dialogue rather than a monologue. It's awesome. So, with that said, let's rehash some of the topics that were covered today. I'll give you guys my opinion, my insight on it. I've already given you my opinion on flag burning, stomping, desecration, but I have a video here that I want to play, and I think it's one of those things that it's a gut reaction to be upset when you see somebody stomping on the American flag. If you consider it a symbol that you revere, if it's something that you find particularly important, then it's easy to feel upset when you see these kind of things. And there was a Vietnam veteran that apparently saw a Westboro church, Baptist church protester stepping on the American flag. So I have the video. I got the clip here. This is from, conservativetribune.com. And an article, I don't know who wrote this article. They don't have them credited. But anyway, the video is embedded in the article. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you. Here we go.
I went there to mind my own business and just to make sure everything was up to the up, that there was no problems. It was not my intention to cause a problem.
By the way, this is Richard Pierce. He's the one that was the actual Vietnam veteran that had an issue with them stomping on the flag.
However, when I saw the young lady walking across the highway, dragging our flag under her feet, I lost my temper. And the only way that I could demonstrate that was to spill my coffee on them.
Okay, and I'm looking at the picture of this. It doesn't look like he just spilled his coffee. He said spilled. He was like cocked back, like threw his coffee on this woman. And anyway, there's a clip here following of a police officer escorting him off. He has more to say. Here it goes.
It's very meaningful to me as a Marine, as it is to all Marines. So many people have died in defense of that flag. I don't care who you are, you're not going to disrespect the flag. And if I have to go to jail to defend our flag, I'm going to do it. And I take that very strongly.
Okay, so my take on this is, first of all, this guy committed a crime. He assaulted somebody with hot coffee. That's a criminal offense. That's assault. So I don't think that he should be commended as a hero, just so you know where I stand. I understand his sentiment behind wanting to protect the flag as a symbol. But again, what I was mentioning earlier today is that these flags, they're you can just go buy them at a store. So when somebody goes and buys a flag, that's personal property. Okay, that's their private property. They own it. They paid for it. It belongs to them, which means that they can do whatever they want with that property. That's their right, which means that you can't take it from them. You know, if they're doing something inappropriate with it, if you feel that it's disrespectful what they're doing, you can't take it from them because it belongs to them. If they're not hurting you or depriving you of your rights, then you can't do anything to them legally, as far as I'm concerned. You know, now that there may be laws in the future that will protect people's feelers from getting hurt. Oh, you hurt my feelers. Oh no. There may be these kind of anti-butt hurt laws. That's what I'm going to refer to them. Keep people from getting all butt hurt about things, but that doesn't make it just. It's not a just law. In my opinion, and according to Bastiat's the law, which I seem to be on this revolving train here of just talking about Bastiat, because you can apply his logic to everything. Everything in our society, you have a problem with it, you can talk about Bastiat's opinion on it. He gave it, and it was eloquently done, much better than the way I'm going to discuss it now. But Bastiat says that the only purpose of a government is to prevent injustice. That's it. You know, they're supposed to protect life, liberty, and persons. But the way that they do that is by one simple function, and that's to prevent injustice. Their job is not to create equality or to create an atmosphere of justice, but that happens when you prevent justice or when you prevent injustice. So it is injustice. You're perpetuating injustice if you throw hot coffee on somebody because you've violated the non-aggression principle. You've hurt them in some way. You've assaulted them. So that violates the non-aggression principle. You violated their right of their property if you try to take away their flag that they're burning. Now, you can disagree with it, and you can say something to them. You can talk to them, or you can exercise your freedom of movement. You can walk away from the area and not be offended by that. That's all fine and good. If it's on a YouTube video, you can choose not to watch that YouTube video. That's your choice as a free individual person to do whatever you want to do. You can choose to watch it or not watch it. Okay, so you control the levels of offended that you'll get. You control how offended you'll get over that. Regarding burning the flag itself, I think it's really probably not a good move. I wouldn't do it. I know that it's offensive. First of all, I know that many, many people find it offensive, and it doesn't benefit me in any way that I can articulate. I have no idea how, other than just to prove that I have the right itself, how burning a flag, stomping on a flag, doing something offensive to it. I don't understand how that does anything to benefit me. What it does do is create a lot of people that don't like that, and then they are no longer on my side. But I guess maybe it educates people in the same way that that open carry would do. You educate people about your rights. I guess I can see that. But I think within our own communities and inside the liberty movement, it's so divisive. The moment you do something like that, it's the same thing as basically calling somebody a name or shouting down somebody that you're trying to convert, to your political ideology. If you're trying to get them to understand where you're coming from, a good idea is not to do something that dramatically offends them. Now, people may be offended by open carry, and for that, I'm willing to have conversations with them about it. But I think they're less inclined to be hostile to me, as if they would have been if they were upset about me burning a flag or stomping on a flag. I think if somebody who's patriotic, serve their country, or they just have a deep respect for this symbol of freedom, if they see somebody, desecrating that in what they believe may be almost a religious item, you could make an instant enemy, and they may never listen to you. But if you're out walking with a firearm and they just disagree with you on that, perhaps they'll talk with you, perhaps they won't. But either way, you'll be normalizing it. And I don't think that, because that's one of the big things for open carry. That's a purpose of open carrying, is to normalize firearms in public, so people get used to it, and it's not a big deal. It won't be a big deal if people see it every day. But I don't really want to normalize flag burning. I don't have any problem with people doing it, but I don't know if that's the goal of people who are burning flags. They want to normalize flag burning so people know they have a right to do it and they're used to seeing it so they don't get offended. If that's the case, then okay, that you're accomplishing that goal. But maybe I'm just confused about the goals related to flag burning. But other than, like I said, just the assertion of that right to do it in the first place. I have a big problem when so-called, liberty-minded people or patriots, instantly join the side of somebody who was going after whoever desecrated the flag. Now, I understand it's divisive, and I understand that it's rude, and I'm not particularly extremely offended by it, but I find it kind of shocking, and I have a lot of respect for the flag. I swore an oath, and I swore my allegiance to the flag. These are things that I meant and I took seriously, but I don't mean them over the liberties that they represent. I don't defend the flag more than I defend the liberties that the flag represents. I don't support the Constitution more than the ideals of freedom that the Constitution represents. I don't support the Libertarian Party more than the ideals that I feel they represent and that are important to me. None of these things matter. My politician, if I thought that a politician stood for principles that I supported, I'd vote for him. And I'm not going to vote for him the moment I think that they don't. So it's just like any other thing. The progressives have used a lot of energy to change words, what the words mean. And they do the same things with the symbols. The symbols suddenly change meaning. And I think it's a really dangerous path to take when we start putting more emphasis on the symbol itself than what it actually is meant to represent. I think that's incredibly important that we distinguish that difference, that the flag is not sacred. It's just a piece of colored cloth. It is just a piece of colored cloth. That's all it is, and that's all it's ever going to be. But what we give to it is meaning, and that meaning is what's important. It's not the flag. It could be anything. You could give that same meaning to any symbol. You could say a thumbs up means liberty, and now suddenly that means liberty. But that's the idea you gave behind it. I don't know. I'm just spinning my wheels here. This is my point, though. I think that there's nothing wrong with the right being asserted to do whatever you want with your personal property. I find it distasteful, but I'm not going to say that you shouldn't do it and that you don't have a right to do it. I personally won't, but that's my decision. But that's kind of the whole point of being a libertarian. As long as you're not doing anything to hurt me, I don't really care what you do. As long as you're not hurting me, hurting others, I may talk about it. I may have an opinion about it. That doesn't mean that I'm going to tell you how to live your life or what you should do. I think that's kind of the point. I hope that people get to that more in our country. It's just so easy to be like, yeah, there ought to be a law against that, Yeah, you're right. Yeah, there should be a law against that. And then, the collective comes together and makes a law in which they protect people's feelers. Got to make sure nobody's getting butt hurt out there. So also, we talked pretty extensively about Abraham Lincoln, so I'm not going to get into that conversation. I want to talk about these positive and negative rights. I really like the concept of breaking it down like this because it does make it really simple. When you're talking about positive, that means that somebody has an obligation to provide something for you. That they have to do something to give you that right. So if we're talking about healthcare, if you have a positive right to healthcare, and let's just briefly talk about this. If you have a positive right to healthcare, as in you have a right and somebody has to provide it to you, that's a positive right. What I believe is that healthcare is a negative right. You have a right to go try to get healthcare. You have a right to, just as anybody else, to participate in trade to get healthcare. But you don't have no one has an obligation to provide it for you. You may not be able to afford it, and if so, that sucks. Now, there may be things that come together as a community, like where we're deciding that, hey, I'd like to help so and so. They can't afford their health insurance, or their health care. So I'd like to help them. That's called charity. But when you start saying that you have a positive right to services, items, things along those lines, it's a really scary and dangerous path when you start assigning different things as positive rights. I wholeheartily disagree. I think most of our rights are negative. There are very few positive rights that are out there at all. Honestly, I'm trying to think of one thing that is a positive right that somebody has to do something for. I can't think of one. And I think that's the biggest deal. That so many Americans have decided that it's okay. You can give the government all of these positive liberties. You have these positive liberties, and the government is supposed to be the one to fulfill them, like your need for security. No, that's a negative right. You have the right to defend yourself. The government doesn't have to provide that positive right to you. It's a negative right. Just like I say all the time, the Supreme Court decided that the police have no duty or obligation to protect you. So obviously that's not a positive right. It can't be. Just like if they said that you had a positive right to electricity. You don't have a positive right. You don't have a right to electricity. First of all, let's point out the fact that electricity is fairly new in the grand scheme of the world. It's a fairly new invention. It's not really an invention, discovery. Let's call it that. It's fairly new. But, there were so many people that lived without it. So how can it be a human right if people lived without it? And there's currently people living without it right now. So that's not a positive right. That's a negative right. You have a right to go try to buy a product on the free market, and if that product is electricity, whoever's providing it for you has a right to negotiate with you back and forth until you come with some amicable deal. But when we start saying that people have a right to services, it starts to go down this very scary path of the government can protect you, the government can give you everything that you'll ever need. And that's just one of the biggest lies that has been perpetuated and brainwashed into our society. The government cannot and should not provide you everything. Their only job, the only duty of a just government is to prevent injustice. Not to ensure equality, but to prevent injustice. And what's unjust? Violence toward others? Yes. Somebody violating somebody's individual rights? Yes, that's injustice. But it's not injustice to say that I don't want to associate with this particular group, and then to have somebody, or it's not injustice for me to say that I don't want to associate with somebody. That's just me asserting my rights. They don't have a right to force me to do anything. So I think that's a big thing. But I want to talk about one of the last things we talked about with Rob, and it's something I've been thinking about for the last few days, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of bothering me. I don't know where this is headed. I can't see the outcome. I can see two potential outcomes, and I also don't know what to do. I'm really at a loss right now for what to do. And what I'm talking about is, where will our country be in 20 years? What's going to happen with the advent of new technology? I mean, it's going to be crazy. We're going to have the ability for our government to have a complete and total police state, surveillance state. If you think that Google Glass was an excellent invention, imagine how it's going to look 20 years from now. What will Google Glass kind of technology look like? And we talk about how cell phones can be used, the cameras can be tapped into by the government. This is fact. It's never been disproven by Edward Snowden, by the way. They can access and turn on your phone when it's off, as long as it has a battery in it. They can turn on your camera, and none of this stuff you even know about. So basically, you have this surveillance device that some people, carry everywhere they go at all times. It's within arm's length. Some people put it in their pocket. Some people strap it to their hip. Some people put it in their purse or whatever. I mean, this is with you everywhere you go. Imagine in 20 years what the situation will be. What other devices will completely change the way we live our lives? Imagine your life now, and imagine it without the internet. Imagine it without a smartphone. Those two things have revolutionized your life just within the past 20 years. I mean, dramatically revolutionized your life. 20 years ago, no one was carrying around smartphones. And 20 years ago, no one was thinking about really even the internet in everyday conversations, their everyday life. You know, around when I was a teenager, and by the way, I'm 30 years old now, around when I was a teenager, the internet really started, coming up with like AOL and things like that. I remember those pretty vividly. But there was a period in my life where that was just not there. It was just not there. Nobody even thought about those things. So the only time I ever got on a computer was when I was in school, and it was on one of those old Macintosh computers, the big ones they're huge all the way back. Yeah, those ones. So imagine how much your life will be revolutionized. Will we have these smartphones? Will they mutate into some other kind of invention to where it'll be everywhere you go? You'll be on camera. What will the government have access to that? What will happen? What will be the next threat that the government will say they need this many more powers? Every year there's a threat. Every year. There's never a time in history where it's just like we're not worried about anybody out there and the government isn't asking for more power. They're always asking for more power, more control. And when they get it, they ratchet it up. They get your consent to ratchet up all these programs, and sometimes they don't even consent you to do it. They just do. They just ratchet up the government, increase surveillance, increase their power, violate the Constitution. Oh, that document to them doesn't mean anything. That's the document that's restraining their power. They think less than nothing of that document. So what will it be in 20 years? What kind of changes and innovations are going to dramatically change the way we live our lives? And how will it affect our government? Will our government be policing us with robots? I mean, I'm not a technophobe by any means, but this conversation is being had right now in police departments about using drones to police. How would we use robots to police? Things along those lines. They want to, first of all, you could go with the conversation that could potentially kill jobs. I don't really believe that technology kills jobs. It just frees Americans or human beings to basically just find another way to be creative and make money doing that thing. So, I'm not concerned about it in that regard, but I am concerned about not even in a Terminator-esque scenario, but a government that has the ability to control and use this Leviathan in a way that was unintended. And I mean, what kind of technology advancements are we going to see, and how will the government use it? I honestly believe that when people discuss, using force against our government, how they say, we should just have a second American Revolution and, let's kick them all out of there and stuff like that. I don't think it's going to be effective. I don't think that is the answer, because I think it's already too late. Even if you wanted to do that, the government, you would be disappeared in a second, in an instant. The government has so much control and so much ability to shut down dissenters. Hell, even at local police departments now, a local police department has enough arms and manpower to basically put down any uprising that were to happen, even on the local level. So imagine if the federal government was involved, and these people will protect themselves. If anything, these people care about is their own power. So of course, they're going to quash any kind of rebellion, any kind of revolution. It's going to be stopped far before it even gets to anything that you can do physically. They're just going to show up at your door, kick it in the middle of the night, and you'll be disappeared. So these are the things that I'm curious about. What's going to happen? We're at this tipping point. I don't know. And as Rob said, we're either going to go one way or another. And I think the only way to really ensure that we do not go towards tyranny, slide down that slippery slope of tyranny, is that we work hard to have these conversations about liberty, philosophy, Spread the message of liberty. Talk to our neighbors. Talk to our friends. Talk to people that disagree with us. Put ourselves in uncomfortable positions. Basically, work for liberty. You may have 150 hours a month to put towards television. You may have lots of time to devote to your hobbies or things that you find particularly interesting. Don't you have a little bit of time every week to devote towards liberty? I do, and that's why I do the show. I only ask that you guys do the same. Find what you can do. With that said, I had a good time on today's show. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to check us out at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. You can follow us at Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And follow us on Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.